takes feedback to heart? Does one negative comment stick with you for days or maybe even weeks? If you are nodding your head yes, then you are in exactly the right place today. I am Melody Wilding. I'm a professor of human behavior and executive coach, and the author of Trust Yourself, Stop Overthinking, and Channel Your Emotions for Success at Work. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are joining us live, make sure you come and say hi in the comments. Let me make sure I can see the chat. Let us know where you are watching from today. If you are catching this on replay, type replay in the chat. As we go along, please help your neighbors out. If you hear something that resonates with you, something that is important, a comment or a thought you want to share, go ahead and put it in the chat. I want to make sure that this is interactive and as much of a conversation as possible. So I see some of you joining are saying hello. Teresa, great to see you. Zeba, Emmanuel, nice to have you here. Sanjeev, let's see. April, hello, great to have you. So again, as you are coming on, say hello. Let us know where you're watching from in the chat today. Okay, so today we are talking about how to stop taking criticism so personally. This is a huge topic we discussed in my coaching program, Resilient, which is a first of its kind, comprehensive program to help sensitive leaders and high achievers regain their confidence, master their emotions, and reach their full potential at work. And it's been quite a week here so far. I can't believe it's only Tuesday as of right now. And that's because early enrollment for Resilient has officially opened today. So if you are interested in that, the link is here on the screen. It is melodywilding.com/resilient. And if you are at all interested in the program, I want to encourage you to go ahead and check it out. We have a limited number of spots, so you want to get in while there are still spots available. Okay, hello, Patty. Hello, Debbie. Great to have you. Haley, Steve from London. Wonderful. All right, criticism. This is such a huge topic that we talk about in Resilient because as sensitive strivers, as people that are both highly sensitive and high achieving, we tend to take criticism to heart. We are professionals who think and feel everything more deeply. We are more attuned to our own thoughts and emotions, as well as the emotions of other people around us. And because of the way that we are wired as sensitive strivers, I count myself among you, I am one myself, we are more vigilant of our surroundings. The trait of high sensitivity evolved because it was helpful back in cave person days to have someone in the group who was cautious, who was perceptive, who was aware of subtleties happening in the environment because that helped everyone in the group stay free from harm. But now that tendency to be monitoring everything and be overly vigilant can translate into being on guard for danger, for threats, even when there is none. So, on top of that, as sensitive strivers, we tend to feel things in a big way. We have more intense, we have more complex emotional responses, both positive. So, we feel the upside of things like excitement and joy and passion. But we also feel so called negative emotions, sadness, frustration, anger. We feel those things in a big way as well and more intensely. We have high highs, we have low lows, and all of this can explain why we are more affected by feedback. And hello, fellow Melody, good to see you here. And she said, yes, I am a sensitive striver. I feel everything deeply, and I want to be a high performer. Yes. So if you can relate to what I'm saying, type me in the chat if you think this is you as well. If you are someone who, because of the way you are wired, you feel you are more affected by feedback. So for us sensitive strivers, some typical reactions to feedback. I want to normalize this because I think as a sensitive striver, only about 20% of the population is wired this way. So it can feel like Why am I so weird? Why am I the oddball? Why does everyone seem to take these things in stride, yet I am so deeply affected by everything? So I think part of the power of being here today, part of the power of being in a community like Resilient is normalizing that you are not the only one going through this. So many of you here are relating to this. Tanisha, good to see you. Okay, great. April says, me all the way. Yes. Now, typical reactions we as sensitive strivers tend to have to feedback, generalizing. So we take one mistake or one instance of poor performance and we generalize it to a pattern or a problem. So there may be one meeting where you don't speak up, or one meeting where you don't quite land your presentation in the way that you hope to. And then we generalize that to say, oh, I'm horrible at this. I'm horrible at presenting. I hate presenting to senior executives, whatever it may be. We take one instance of getting feedback and we generalize it to a pattern. We also tend to have strong emotional reactions to feedback. We may get extremely defensive. And many times I hear that people have trouble with crying. So even sometimes when we get positive feedback, we may cry or get emotional in that moment. And what I find too is that as sensitive strivers, so many of us fear feedback so much, we're so hesitant around it that we shy away from it altogether. We keep a low profile, we keep our head in the sand, we try to avoid conversations or situations where that sort of negative feedback may come up. We don't put ourselves in opportunities or in the spotlight where we may be exposed to that. So we avoid it, which only ends up hurting ourselves in the end, because the less you get feedback, the more you tend to fear it. So it tends to backfire on us. Yeah. And Teresa said, for me, if I make one mistake, I fear that I'll keep making it. I think that's a great example of that generalization, right? That we think it will keep happening again and again and again. Okay, let me just check in here in the comments. And as I said at the beginning, if you're just joining, as we're going along, please say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you hear something that resonates with you or a thought you want to share, please go ahead and type it in the chat. Help your neighbors out if you are hearing something that's important, you want to underscore it, or you want to add your own thoughts. Okay, so stating the obvious here, we know full well that getting better at receiving feedback is crucial to your own advancement and to just feeling more secure and confident within yourself, right? Because when you're truly confident, when you deeply trust yourself, you're not so swayed or you're not so impacted by other people's opinions of you. So that's what we work on helping you achieve in Resilient over the course of 3 months. But today, I want to give you a few tips and mindset shifts to help set you on that path today. And Debbie was saying she loves the idea of collecting more feedback, more data points. Debbie, we're going to touch on that in just a minute here. So, okay. So today I want to share with you some tips to help you change your relationship with criticism for the better so that you can respond to it with more grace, equanimity, strength. Now, we go much deeper into all of this. I don't have time today. We're just going to touch the surface, but we go much deeper into this concept and so much more, from overthinking to imposter syndrome to speaking up. We go over all of that in Resilient. And as I mentioned, early enrollment is open today. So if you want to take advantage of the $500 early bird discount, if you want to secure your spot, then make sure you head to that link on the screen, melodywilding.com/resilient. And you can also set up a time to chat with me. Feel free to DM me here on social media, or on the webpage there, you'll see a link to schedule a chat with me. So we can touch base, see if it's a right fit for you, and I can answer any questions you have. All right, let's start with an important reframe when it comes to taking criticism less personally. And that is this: feedback is engagement. I want to ask someone to type that in the chat here. Feedback is engagement. What I mean by that is the fact that you are getting hopefully constructive criticism from someone is a good sign. It's a good thing, especially if it's from someone who is in a position of authority or a senior leader. I want you to take this as a positive sign. This person cares enough about you. They have noticed you enough that they are willing to take their very valuable, limited time and energy and invest it into helping you improve your performance. If they didn't care about you, they wouldn't bother. People have a lot of competing priorities on their plate. And if they didn't see your potential, if they didn't think you were worth it and they wanted to invest in you, they wouldn't bother. So the fact that they are giving you input, while granted, I completely understand it may not feel good or wonderful in the moment, and that's okay. But I want you to step back and realize that it is actually a fantastic sign. So that's the first thing I want you to remember and to embrace, that feedback is engagement. Okay, I see so many of you. Thank you, Alexa, Haley, Deb, Tanisha, Dira. Thank you so much for all putting that in the chat. Okay, Sanjeev has a great tip here that I'm going to come back to. All right, so we talked about feedback is engagement. That's one shift I want you to embrace. The second is that feedback is data. And Deb was referring to this earlier. Feedback is data. Someone type that in. Feedback is neutral information. Specifically, it tells you about the other person's perceptions and priorities. So that can help you calibrate and adapt your own behavior to be more effective, of course. But I share this because it's also important to keep in mind that feedback is just one person's opinion. And that opinion can be impacted by many things, from that person's emotions, from the pressures they're under, the attitudes they have, the biases they hold. So whenever you're getting feedback, consider the source of that data very carefully. There's a saying, it's one of my favorite sayings, and it goes, once is chance, twice is coincidence, thrice is a pattern. I'm going to say that again. Once is chance, twice is coincidence, thrice is a pattern. In terms of feedback, this means that whenever possible, you should try to triangulate what you're hearing, acting on something once you hear it 3 times or from 3 different sources. Because what I see sensitive strivers do is that they try to react and try to respond and try to implement every single piece of feedback you're getting. And how many times have any of you, and type yes in the chat if this has happened to you, where you get one piece of feedback from someone, then you hear the exact opposite thing from somebody else, and you feel caught in the middle. You're facing analysis paralysis of, well, what do I do? One person said X, one person said Y. How do I reconcile those two things? So that's why I want you to think about this idea of triangulating feedback. How can you hear it from different sources or frequency, 3 different times? Because if you try to react to everything, you know that this leaves you in a reactive mode where you never feel good enough. You can never do enough to make every single person happy, right? And I'm seeing a lot of you are relating to this. Debbie, thank you. You said something very smart here. Focus on the trends, not on the outliers. Save your mental energy. I love that. Focus on the trends, not on the outliers. 100%. Yeah, because if you are constantly reacting to, taking on every piece of feedback, you will lose not only your own confidence, but also your sense of self, because you are just appeasing others. You're just showing up how they want you to show up instead of practicing discernment around which piece of feedback do I actually want to implement? What is most valuable to me? What meshes with my goals, my priorities, rather than everybody else just telling me what they want me to do? Okay. Yes. So far we've talked about feedback is engagement, feedback is data. But you might be wondering, how can you cope better in the moment when you're receiving that criticism and afterward? So I want to give you some tips around that. So first is to give yourself permission not to respond on the spot. As a sensitive striver, you become overstimulated more easily. So, because of the way we're wired, we have a more active nervous system, which basically just means that it takes less for our body to hit a state of stress. And when you feel overwhelmed, it's all the more likely that you may get defensive, you may over apologize, you may undermine yourself, or you may even cry. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with crying. I am a proud feeler of feelings here. But many times, what I hear from people is that crying is not what they want to express in that moment. It's not the response that makes them feel most in their strength. So that's what I'm talking about here. Who has been there? Who has ever cried getting feedback? If you are willing to share this, I'm raising my hand here. I'm saying yes, but type me in the chat if this has ever been you. So, this is why it is very wise to put space between hearing the feedback and responding to it. Okay. So, you can do this a few ways. You can try rehearsing responses. Things like, thank you for sharing that. I want to digest what you've shared and I'll get back to you. Or you can put words to your emotions, saying, I'm surprised to hear that. I'd like to take some time to mull over what you've shared. All right. So yes, a lot of you sharing that yes, you have gotten emotional in the face of feedback. I think so many of us have been there. So again, put space between hearing the feedback and responding to it. Use some of those scripts. Things like, I want to digest what you've shared and get back to you with my response. I'm surprised, I'm shocked, I'm disappointed to hear that. I'd like some time to mull that over and contemplate what you've shared. Now, if you do cry, if you do get emotional, do not apologize for that. Do not say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This is so embarrassing. I can't believe this. Right? The other person will follow your lead. If you start undermining yourself, you subtly suggest to somebody else that it's okay if they treat you with less respect. You want to respond with strength. And one research-backed way to do this is to attribute your emotional reaction to commitment and dedication. And what the research shows is that if you do this, you will be perceived more positively. You will be perceived as being dedicated, as being loyal, as being passionate. So this might sound like, for example, as you can see, I'm having an emotional reaction, and that's because I care about the work we do and I care about it making an impact. So remember that. If you have an emotional response, do not over apologize, do not undermine yourself, but attribute your reaction to commitment and dedication. Okay, great. Now, if there's one thing you take away from this live today, I want it to be this. The more you get feedback, the less you fear it. Again, I'll repeat that. I'm repeating a lot of things today because they're important and I want them to sink in. The more you get feedback, the less you fear it. So instead of shuddering away, holding yourself away from criticism, I want you to start soliciting it proactively. Now, this process, it is called desensitization. And it involves gradually exposing yourself to scary situations until eventually the fear starts to dissipate. So, the more comfortable you get having difficult conversations, the easier they become, and the more confident you grow as a result. So, think about this. You've probably seen this firsthand. I know, especially when I was earlier in my career, I was very afraid of feedback. And so, my performance reviews, I dreaded for weeks, for months. It was all I could think about because that was the only time I was getting real significant feedback. But as I matured, as I learned how to manage myself as a sensitive striver, and of course, now in my work, I'm putting myself out there all the time and exposing myself to feedback all the time to the point where a snide comment here and there doesn't affect me that much because I have desensitized myself to it. I have built my resilience to criticism. Okay. So I want you to think about, and I want you to go ahead and type in the chat, what is a low stakes opportunity that you have right now to get more feedback? What is a low stakes opportunity you have right now to get more feedback? Maybe to show your work earlier on in a process, to show your work more often to new people, to set up more regular one on ones with your boss, to ask for one thing you're doing well, one thing you can improve, for example. Okay. So I want to hear from you. What ideas do you have for seeking feedback proactively? Go ahead and type that in the chat. I want to make sure we can learn from one another because you all have such great wisdom here. So Chris was saying reviewing my resume. April was saying in my last position, I wouldn't get feedback even when I asked for it. It led me to believe it wasn't important enough to have my concerns addressed. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's interesting is that the research shows that one major reason people leave their jobs or they feel they're not advancing or satisfied with their work is because they're not getting enough feedback. And I think that's important to remember when you're on the other side of this coin and we're fearful rather of giving someone that feedback, to remember that actually people crave this, especially when it's constructive, it's given empathetically and compassionately, and from a solution oriented perspective. Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, so we covered a lot today. Let's review. I shared with you 6 main points, and I want to go over them one by one. So feedback is engagement. If someone is giving you feedback, it is a good sign that they are willing to invest in that relationship with you. Second, feedback is data. Third, don't take every piece of criticism you receive. Be discerning. Fourth, give yourself permission not to respond on the spot. Place space between hearing the feedback and responding to it. 5, if you do have an emotional reaction, attribute it to your dedication, your passion, your commitment. And 6, go on the offense and seek it proactively so you fear criticism less. Go ahead and type in, what was the number one thing you are taking away from this conversation today, or the number one thing that resonated with you? Now, you are not going to please everyone all the time. Criticism is a natural consequence, of going for your goals and for playing a bigger game in your career. And remember, at the end of the day, the opinion that matters the most is the one you hold of yourself. If you want help, finally trusting yourself, finally feeling as confident as you deserve to be in your career, then I want to invite you to check us out in Resilient. This program is specifically designed for sensitive strivers, that's sensitive, high-achieving leaders and professionals who are ready to go from insecure to confident, from overthinking everything to centered and at peace, and from on an emotional roller coaster to calm and in control. So you can learn more. You can secure your spot right now at melodywilding.com/resilient. And now is the time. This is your chance to take advantage of the early enrollment period to save $500 on your enrollment. It's only available for a very short time. The spots are extremely limited because we want to ensure that we can give everyone hands-on attention in the program. Now, this is the highest touch way to work with me at the moment, and our members say over and over and over again how much this program has changed their life. I'll make sure to we have an entire page of our clients' transformations and testimonials that I'll put a link to in the chat. And remember, you can contact me, you can book a call on the website to chat with me if you have any questions, and I'm here to get you what you need. I want to make sure you can make the best and right decision for yourself. So check out melodywilding.com/resilient. Book a quick call if you have questions or you want to chat. I hope to see you inside. And until next time, take care of yourself.